Welcome back to the deep dive. We often talk about figures who come to power through, birthright or some huge popular movement.
hmm
But today we're looking at a man who basically engineered his own destiny. We're talking about someone who clawed his way to the top through sheer, uh, focused ambition.
And ruthlessness. Can't forget that part.
Definitely.
No.
We are diving into the life and legacy of Muhammad Ali Pasha, the Ottoman Albanian governor who, really against all odds, became the founder of modern Egypt.
Yeah.
And his dynasty. It lasted for almost 150 years.
Yeah, our mission today is really to unpack the sources and figure out the blueprint for his rise. I mean, how does a commander who only sets foot in Egypt in 1801 manage to build this enormous modern military?
Right.
Completely revolutionize the economy and set himself up as the de facto ruler of a huge empire.
An empire that, at its peak around 1840, was just massive. We're talking Sudan, the Arabian Peninsula, the Levant, Crete, even parts of Greece.
It's an incredible achievement, especially when you remember he was technically still a governor for the Ottoman Sultan.
He didn't just take over. He tore the whole thing down and rebuilt it from the ground up. The economy, industry, society, everything.
It was a meticulous, calculated effort. The sources really show that. He takes this chaotic, weak Ottoman province in 1805, and by 1840, Cairo isn't just some provincial backwater.
No, it's the center of a regional power that's genuinely threatening Constantinople itself.
Exactly, and that ambition really paid off. He got what he wanted. Hereditary rule for his family. That dynasty controlled Egypt right up until the 1952 revolution.
Okay, so let's unpack this. How did a military commander from Albania do it? How did he consolidate power and completely redesign a country? Such an unlikely story of military genius, but also just a phenomenal level of political ruthlessness.
Well, to get the ruthlessness, you have to start with his unlikely origins. Muhammad Ali was born in 1769 in Kavala, which today is in Greece, but was then part of Ottoman Rumelia.
And his family, they were ethnic Albanians.
That's right. His father, Ibrahim Aga, was a merchant tobacco and shipping, but he also held a local rank as an Ottoman commander.
So he wasn't born into the top tier of the aristocracy, but he had connections to both business and the military.
Yeah.
That's a useful combination.
It is a very practical background. After his father died, his uncle took him in. And Ali, while he showed a real talent for administration early on, collecting taxes for his uncle, that's how he earned the rank of Bulukbashi.
So a local commander and tax guy.
Yeah. And he used that status to marry his wealthy cousin. All of this, it positioned him perfectly for the moment the world turned upside down.
And that moment was Napoleon Bonaparte invading Egypt.
That's the one. He didn't go to Egypt to be a governor. He went there as a soldier.
For combat, yeah.
Right. In 1801, he arrives as a second commander with an Albanian contingent. Their mission, on paper, was to help the Ottomans kick out the French after Napoleon had to pull back.
But Napoleon's withdrawal didn't exactly bring peace and quiet, did it?
Not at all. It created a massive power vacuum. It was this three-way free-for-all. You had the Ottoman forces, the old Mamluk elites, and the remnants of the French collaborators.
And the Mamluks? They had been the ruling class in Egypt for centuries.
For 600 years, yeah. They were weakened, but they were not gone. In this chaos, from about 1801 to 1805, this is where Muhammad Ali's political genius really shines.
He used his Albanian troops as a political tool.
As a lever, exactly. He wasn't loyal to the Ottomans, he wasn't loyal to the Mamluks, he was loyal to himself. He would align with one side then the other, always improving his own position.
And while he was doing that, he was also winning over the locals.
A master pragmatist. He saw that the people hated the old Ottoman administration, so he steps in, creates order, fights corruption, and he starts to build support among prominent Egyptians.
Who were his key allies on the Egyptian side?
The ulama, the religious scholars, especially from the Al-Azhar Mosque, were crucial, and a very important Egyptian leader named Umar Makram. This coalition, they become his political base.
So by 1805, they'd had enough of the official Ottoman governor.
They'd had enough. And they do something pretty much unheard of. They go to the Ottoman Sultan and demand that he replace his own appointed governor with Muhammad Ali.
And they had the backing of the public.
They did. The street was behind them. The Sultan in Constantinople was stuck. He couldn't risk a full-blown civil war in Egypt, so he caved. Ali was named Wali, or governor, and given the title of Pasha.
So he was appointed by popular demand, not just by the Sultan's decree. That's a huge shift in power.
It's revolutionary. But even with popular support, he still had one massive problem.
The Mamluks.
The Mamluks. 600 years of power doesn't just disappear. Ali knew they were the single greatest threat to his rule. As long as they existed, he wasn't safe.
He couldn't just fight them on the battlefield.
No, he knew he had to eliminate their leadership entirely. There could be no half measures.
And this is where things get really dark. The massacre of the Mamluks in 1811.
It was an act of pure political theater and mass murder. Ali throws this huge party at the Cairo Citadel on March 1st, 1811. The official reason was to celebrate his son, Tusun Pasha, who was about to lead an army to Arabia.
The ultimate false pretext.
A perfect one. The Mamluk leaders, maybe they thought Ali needed them to keep things stable while his son was gone, so they accepted the invitation.
Big mistake.
The biggest. As they were leaving the citadel, riding through this narrow, walled-in passage, they were trapped. Ali's troops, hidden on the walls above, just opened fire.
It must have been absolute carnage. There was no escape.
A perfect kill box. The sources differ on the exact numbers, but somewhere around 500 Mamluk leaders and their retainers were killed that day. This wasn't just an assassination, it was the decapitation of an entire ruling class.
And the purge didn't stop at the citadel gates.
No. Once the leadership was gone, Ali sent his army out across Egypt. Their orders were to hunt down and eliminate any remaining Mamluk forces and seize all their property.
That was the moment. He went from being a governor to being an absolute ruler.
It was. The obstacle was gone. And it sent a terrifying message to everyone else, the ulama, the merchants, that Muhammad Ali's will was now law. He had a clean slate to start building his own empire.
So if the end goal is a personal dynasty, the first step has to be money. He needed an economy that could fund a massive, modern army.
And his economic reforms were just as ruthless as his political ones. The foundation was centralization. He basically nationalized all the agricultural land in Egypt.
How did he manage that? Did he just declare it?
He was clever about it. He used the existing Ottoman system, the iltizam system, against itself.
Right, that was the tax farming system where local elites would collect taxes for the state.
Exactly. The tax farmers, or multazims, were mostly Mamluks, so Ali just jacked up the taxes they owed the state to an impossible level.
So they couldn't pay.
They couldn't pay, and when they defaulted, Ali, citing Ottoman law, legally confiscated their properties.
Wow, so he didn't have to fight them for the land. He just bankrupted them using the system they were part of.
That's the genius of it. It was technically legal, but it was confiscation by design. Suddenly, the state, meaning him, owned almost all the productive land in Egypt.
And that leads right into the state monopoly.
Yes. Once he owned the land, he decreed that all farmers had to sell all of their crops directly to the state at a fixed price. Then, the state would turn around and sell those goods on the world market for a massive profit.
But he controlled the entire supply chain.
The whole thing. And it worked incredibly well because of one specific crop, long staple cotton. There was huge demand for it in Europe's textile mills. That cotton money funded everything else.
He also went after other sources of wealth, like the WAC endowments.
The WAF, these religious and charitable endowments, were traditionally tax-free and controlled by the ulama. By taxing them, he did two things. He got more money, and he weakened the power of the religious establishment that might have opposed his modernizing plans.
It's all incredibly calculated. And this whole economic machine, it all served one purpose, right?
One purpose: building the military. The industrialization was all about military self-sufficiency. He had factories in Cairo churning out 1,600 muskets a month, casting cannons.
He didn't want to rely on European arms dealers.
Never. And he needed a navy. So he built a massive shipyard in Alexandria. By the 1830s, he had 9 huge 100-gun warships. For a time, Egypt was a real naval power in the Mediterranean.
How did he pay for all this? The factories, the dams, the infrastructure?
He used a system of concessions. He'd bring in European companies to build the projects, and in return, they'd get a share of the revenue. It was a way to get European money and expertise without giving up control.
This all sounds like incredible progress, but we have to talk about the human cost. The sources are very clear. This was built on the backs of the Egyptian peasants.
Absolutely. The reliance on corvée, or forced peasant labor, was massive and brutal. Peasants were ripped from their villages to work in the factories, dig the canals, and most importantly, to fill the ranks of his army.
The conscription was especially brutal, wasn't it?
It was. The draft was so feared that people would do anything to escape it. Many fled their villages, some going as far as Syria.
And the stories of self-maiming are just horrific.
They are. It tells you everything you need to know about how desperate people were. Men would blind one of their eyes, sometimes with rat poison, or or they would cut off the index finger of their right hand.
The trigger finger, so they couldn't fire a rifle.
Exactly. It was a direct response to the demands of this new, modern army he was building, an army of unwilling soldiers.
So how do you control an army like that? An army of men who literally mutilated themselves to avoid serving.
With incredible systematic discipline. New recruits were totally isolated. They were put in barracks under constant watch, unpredictable roll calls, corporal punishment. The whip was common.
And the bureaucracy played a role in this control, too.
A huge role. This is where you see the state machinery directly serving the military. They created detailed military codes. Every soldier was given a number that tracked him. It was all about surveillance and preventing desertion.
He wasn't just building an army. He was building a system to reprogram people into being soldiers.
That's a good way to put it. And that need for modernization went beyond the barracks. It led, surprisingly, to a cultural awakening.
The Nada, the Arabic Renaissance. How is that connected to military reform?
It's a direct connection.
Yeah.
To run this new military and bureaucracy, he needed trained people. But all the manuals, the engineering texts, the military tactics, they were all in European languages.
So he needed translators.
He needed a whole class of educated Egyptians. So he started sending these educational missions promising students to Europe, especially France. Their job was to learn French, study modern science, and come back to translate everything into Arabic.
So the great Arab literary renaissance was sparked by the need to translate military textbooks.
That's the origin. And to print all these new translations, he established the Bulaq Press around 1821, the first indigenous printing press in the Arab world. It was a tool of the state, printing the official gazette and these crucial French texts.
Now, one of the most surprising reforms, and it seems so disconnected from everything else, is the School of Medicine for Women, the Hakimas.
It seems disconnected, but it's a perfect example of how military logic drove everything. In 1832, he allowed a French doctor, Claude Bay, to set up a medical school for women.
Why women specifically? Why was that so important for his army?
Two main reasons. First, culture and law. At the time, male doctors couldn't treat female patients. So if you want to improve the health of the general population, which is where your future soldiers come from, you need female doctors to treat the women and children.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second reason?
Public health threats to the army. High childhood mortality from things like smallpox was shrinking the pool of future conscripts, and venereal diseases were rampant, weakening his active soldiers. He needed a public health corps to tackle these problems.
So the Hakimas, the doctoresses, were a strategic investment in military manpower.
Precisely. Historians argue the main goal was military. By vaccinating children, he was literally growing his future army. And treating diseases among the civilian population kept his current army healthy.
But getting women into a medical school must have been controversial.
Incredibly difficult. The culture was strongly against it, so the first students weren't from respectable families. They had to recruit young slave girls and orphans.
Another example of the state using vulnerable people to achieve its goals.
Yes, but for those women who graduated, it was a path to incredible social mobility. They got a salary, housing, a government-arranged marriage, and the rank of second lieutenant.
And their duties were vital.
Absolutely. They were running vaccination campaigns, treating hundreds of children a month. They were also doing forensic examinations for legal cases. They were a key part of the modern state infrastructure.
So every reform, no matter how progressive it looks on the surface, ties back to building a state that could project military power.
That's the core of it. The internal machine was all about maximizing military capacity. And once that machine was built, he turned it outward.
Right, let's get to the campaigns. The first one was actually on behalf of the Sultan, the Wahhabi War.
It was. By 1811, the House of Saud had captured the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. The Ottoman Sultan was busy elsewhere, so he outsourced the problem to his most capable vassal, Muhammad Ali.
So Ali sends his son, Tusun Pasha.
He does, and after a tough start, they retake the holy cities. But to finish the job, he needs his other son, the real military genius of the family, Ibrahim Pasha.
Ibrahim seems to be the one actually winning all these battles.
Ibrahim was the hammer. He leads a 2-year campaign, crushes the Saudi forces, and sends their leader to Constantinople to be executed. A huge victory for Ali's prestige.
But as soon as that's done, he immediately launches his own war, one the Sultan didn't ask for, the conquest of Sudan.
And that's the pivot. The Sudan campaign, starting in 1820, was all for him. He wanted 3 things: gold, territory, and most importantly, slaves for his army.
Human capital to fuel the war machine?
Exactly. The Egyptian conscripts were dying from disease and deserting, so he needed a new source of soldiers. His army marches south, defeats the local forces, and starts incorporating captured Sudanese men into new regiments called the Gihadiyya.
The historical memory of that conquest in Sudan is not a positive one.
No, it's remembered as brutal and extractive.
Next up is the Greek disaster. He's back to fighting for the Sultan, and it costs him dearly.
It really does. The Greek rebellion breaks out in 1821, and the Sultan is desperate. He offers Ali the island of Crete if he'll help suppress it. Ali agrees and sends Ibrahim with a massive force.
And Ibrahim is, once again, very successful on the ground. Maybe too successful.
Way too successful. The European powers, Britain, France, Russia, get nervous. They see this ambitious Egyptian empire expanding into the Mediterranean, and they don't like it.
So they intervene.
They do. In 1827, at the Battle of Navarino, a combined European fleet completely annihilates the entire Egyptian navy.
His whole fleet, the one he spent a decade and a fortune building in Alexandria, gone.
Gone. In one afternoon, it was a crushing blow. He lost the ships, the trained sailors, everything. All that investment in self-sufficiency up in smoke.
And that loss is what pushes him into his final, most audacious move, declaring war on the Sultan himself.
Yes. The Sultan refuses to give him Syria as compensation for his lost fleet, so Ali decides, fine, if you won't pay me, I'll just take it.
Why was Syria so important to him?
It was everything. It was a strategic buffer against the Ottomans. It had valuable resources, and controlling the Levant coast would make him the undisputed power in the region.
So in 1831, he invades.
He does, and Ibrahim Pasha, once again, is unstoppable. He takes Acre after a long siege, marches north, and at the Battle of Konya, he completely shatters the main Ottoman army.
Leaving the road to Constantinople wide open.
Wide open, and this is the moment the European powers have a full-blown panic. This isn't a regional conflict anymore. This is a threat to the entire Ottoman Empire.
The whole balance of power in Europe is at stake.
Exactly, so they step in. The result is the Convention of Carthage in 1833. Ali doesn't get independence, but he gets to keep Crete, the Hejaz, and all of Syria. It's a massive win, but it's not enough for him.
He still wants to be his own man, completely free of the Sultan.
And that tension leads to a second war in 1839, and it's the same story. Ibrahim destroys another Ottoman army at the Battle of Nizib. And then, to top it all off, the entire Ottoman navy defects and sails to Alexandria to join Muhammad Ali.
The Sultan is left with literally nothing.
Militarily bankrupt. This triggers the Oriental Crisis of 1840. Europe has to decide what to do about this man who has become too powerful.
And Britain especially decides he has to be stopped. Why?
For Britain, it was about two things. First, they didn't want a strong, independent Arab empire controlling their route to India. Second, they were afraid that if the Ottoman Empire collapsed, their rival, Russia, would swoop in and grab the pieces. They preferred a weak, pliable Ottoman Empire to a strong Egyptian one.
So they chose the devil they knew.
They did. Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia signed the Convention of London. They give Ali an ultimatum. Give up all your claims to the Levant, and we'll grant you and your family hereditary rule over Egypt and Sudan.
But if he refuses?
If he refuses, the offer gets worse, and eventually they'll just depose him. He hesitates, hoping his allies in France will back him up.
But they don't.
They don't, and his gamble fails. The British Navy blockades the Nile, and a joint British-Austrian fleet bombards Acre. He sees the writing on the wall.
He has no choice.
No choice at all. He capitulates. He gives up Syria, Crete, and the Hejaz. He has to slash his army down to just 18,000 men. He loses the empire he built.
But he gets a one thing he wanted most of all.
The ultimate prize. Hereditary rule. His family's right to rule Egypt and Sudan is now guaranteed by the great powers of Europe. It was an unprecedented status for an Ottoman governor. It was the birth of modern, independent Egypt.
So after he achieves that, you'd think it would be a golden age. But the sources say things went downhill fast.
They did. The final years were marked by decay, both for him personally and for the state. His mind started to go after 1843. Maybe senility, maybe a side effect of old medicine, but he became paranoid and unstable.
And his economic system was dismantled?
It was. As part of the peace deal, he was forced to accept European free trade agreements. That meant he had to end his state monopolies.
Which were the foundation of his entire economy.
The entire thing. Suddenly, cheap British manufactured goods flooded the market. His young industries, which had been protected by tariffs, just collapsed.
And Egypt plunged into debt.
A massive financial crisis. By 1844, the debt was enormous. His economic powerhouse was broken.
And by 1848, he was just too ill to rule.
Yes. His son Ibrahim took over, but he was also sick and died within months. Muhammad Ali himself died a year later, in August 1849. He was buried in the great mosque he built in the citadel.
But his funeral wasn't a huge state affair.
No, his successor, his nephew Abbas, despised him. The funeral was a low-key, almost miserable affair. There was no official mourning.
But what did the common people think?
That's the fascinating part. The British consul at the time wrote that despite his harshness, the people felt a real attachment and veneration for him. The older generation remembered the chaos before he came to power. They felt that the prosperity of Egypt had died with him.
Which brings us to the big debate over his legacy. Is he the founder of modern Egypt, or was he just another foreign conqueror?
The father of modern Egypt view is the one you hear most often, and you can see why. He broke Ottoman power, he built the institutions of a modern state, and he secured his dynasty's rule.
But the other side of the argument is pretty compelling, too.
It is. It points out that he was Albanian. The language of his court was Ottoman Turkish, not Arabic, and he exploited Egyptian labor and resources for his own personal ambition, not for some idea of an Egyptian nation. In that view, he's just the most successful in a long line of foreign rulers.
And this debate became a political football in 20th century Egypt.
Oh, absolutely. The later monarchs, his descendants, tried to paint him as this great benevolent nationalist. But then the revolutionaries who overthrew them, like Nasser, had a much more critical take. They acknowledged him as the founder of the modern state, but they slammed him for his monarchical ambition and his total disregard for the suffering of the common people.
When you look back at it all, that focus on the military is just relentless. The state monopoly, the educational missions, even the women's medical school. It was all about building an army that could challenge an empire.
He understood that in the 19th century, military power was impossible without a modern, centralized, educated state, and that required absolute economic control. It was a complete military-industrial complex before that term even existed.
Which leaves us with a really important question for you to think about. If every one of Muhammad Ali's lasting foundational reforms, the bureaucracy, public health, education, if all of it was just a tool to build an army for his own personal ambition, was the creation of modern Egypt just an accident? A byproduct of one man's relentless pursuit of power?
That's the question at the very heart of his legacy. He forged the state, there's no doubt about that. But whether the ends justified the means and who those ends really served, that's the part we're still debating.
Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.